Welcome to the segment, Braden. So today I'm talking about underwriting, in particularly about multifamily expenses in Edmonton, Alberta. So I want to thank you again, Braden, and welcome to the segment.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm very excited to kind of go through it. Looking forward to it. So thank you.
Awesome. So I just turned 50 yesterday, and Braden was surprised. So he said I don't look my age. So I'm going to take that as a compliment. Neither does Braden, but we've been working together now for I think over almost 13, 14 years now. So we've had a long relationship.
Yeah, I know it's been a great relationship. Like you say, it's been a long time. We've been through a lot of ups and downs kind of in this market in Alberta, and we're looking forward to the next 10 to 15 years. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, the last 10 years has almost, I'm not going to say forgettable, but it's been a bit of maybe an eye-opener or baptism by fire for a lot of new investors. I mean, I came in with you in 2010. I rode the good years for a while before we hit some real strong challenges, but now things are changing. So we'll definitely address that.
Yeah, no, it's been a grind. I feel bad for a lot of our owners the past, almost 10 years here in Alberta, but hopefully we can kind of get into a better period here. And I'm assuming that's what we'll be talking about. So
Okay, so the name of the set is Multifamily Expenses, Fact or Fiction. I'm going to ask you some questions at the end. I mean, we all see these pro formas where you see, 3,000, 3,500 per unit per year expenses, and stuff is being sold based on that. And, I know from conversations with you and others, that's the real expenses are, there's a lot of stuff that owners don't know, when they're getting in. So this is the reason why we need to know the real numbers and why I think Braden is one of the strongest underwriters that I know. I've had the privilege to also buy buildings with Braden. I've worked with his dad, Robert, who's basically, how long has he been doing this now? 45 years,
oh,
40
40,
years?
50 years. Yeah, he's been around. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot to underwriting. So I've learned a lot from Braden and Bob, and his brother Dustin as well. So today we're going to talk a lot about underwriting as it pertains to multifamily. So back in September, a bit of a sort of an intro on Braden. Braden manages 7,000 units in the Edmonton area. I'm guessing that's around 350 apartment buildings. So
Yeah, about that. Yeah, it's kind of a mix of multifamily, condominium rental pools, shopping centers, and that type of thing. But yeah.
okay, your sound just cut out for a second, but I heard the end, so I think it's working all right.
Sorry, can
So
you
I'm
hear me?
just
Hear me okay?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I can hear you good now. Yeah, so you have a very wide range of experience when it comes to rentals, especially the market. And probably, you're a well-known authority of that on the market. So, I mean, towards the end, I'm going to ask you some questions about, people that ask you for advice and maybe people that should be asking you for advice. And I know one of the things that I've learned when I'm analyzing any deal, I'll get you guys to underwrite it for me to look at it to see if I missed anything. Like this is my final layer of diligence. And in a lot of ways, you guys are the most accurate because I think you're in the trenches, you're seeing what's going on. It's a leading indicator. You look at an appraiser or even a lender evaluation, CMHC reports, you're looking at stuff that happened 6 months to a year ago. You're looking at stuff in real time as it's happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate. We're privy to the data based on our portfolio size and a different mix of buildings. We're very fortunate to be able to see that data that not a lot of clients can see, both on the expense side and on the rent side that, of course, go into evaluation. So we're very fortunate that we can have that data at our fingertips.
Okay, so I'm just going to share your slide. So Braden did a presentation in September. This was a real eye-opener for me. He talked about what the real expenses were, and the question is that you've been getting from your owners is we've seen these expenses go like crazy. Why haven't I seen it back on rent? So I'm just going to share the screen. Tell me if you can see this okay. Can you see that okay?
Yep, I can see that. Yep.
Okay, so this was a slide that you put together. This was a case study on a B area of a 24-suiter. So do you just want to, you don't have to go into the whole thing, but just maybe explain, what's happened from 2008 to 2023.
Yeah, so kind of the mindset behind this is I was just getting, of course, a lot of questions from our clientele on, expenses. They seem to be going up so rapidly, why, and that type of thing. So I thought I would, again, look back at a lot of our data from the previous years. So what I did is I went back to 2008 on a particular property in a C-type area, just to see at that time point, where were the expenses, what was the average rent, vacancy, and so forth. So as you can see, at that point in time in 2008, and this is again with our portfolio based on our management, our operating expenses were right around 4,800 per unit per year, which when you compare it to 2023 and kind of the start of the pandemic, I mean, that's a huge difference in expenses. And as you can kind of see by this report, not a lot of increase in the rents over that period. Basically from 2010 forward, the rents were basically pretty static, even though the vacancy was at 1% at one point and then fluctuated to 10%. So that was kind of the main indicator that even I was very eye-opening to when I looked at these numbers. And then I kind of did a little bit of a research kind of on the last 3 years and kind of what happened with the pandemic. And as you can see, just in basically since 2020, the expenses went up almost $1,000 per unit per year in a 3-month period. And as you can see, we didn't really see that for almost 10 years, kind of based off my numbers. So it's just such a rapid change at a rapid pace. And we really didn't see that rent capture in order to kind of compensate for that massive increase. So that was kind
Yeah,
of,
and I understand that this is a case study on only one building, right? So you probably pulled financials, you went back a lot of years on a building you've managed long term. This wouldn't necessarily be, in maybe an A plus area. Maybe the numbers would be a little different, or a D area would be different. But this gives you an accurate representation of the Edmonton marketplace.
yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Of course, it fluctuates from, different classes of areas, but this is kind of just a good indication on general of what the market was doing through this period.
Yeah, and I remember this because I remember going into 2014. I remember my expenses were stable for the longest time. Look at the Plaza View area, for example. And then 2016, 17, then the rent incentives came, the rent reductions came. You show a small increase, but that's what we had to do to maintain our occupancy when vacancy went to 10%. I mean, I learned hard that if you're not proactive, if you didn't do that, you were empty. And you paid more to renovate and more to turnover. And turnover is a killer in this business.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that we've really worked hard on with our clients kind of through this period, is just to try to minimize turnover. And we've done some things based on kind of the property in the area to try to capture that. But primarily everything's on the thought basis of these expenses and the ratios that we want to see. And then there's a management that we're able to kind of put in place to help achieve this. So this is kind of our main goal. This is what we want to see for our clients. And of course, everything is kind of predicated on a lot of the fixed expenses out of our control. But, within that kind of range, we're able to manage within that.
Yeah, and this is where my first underwriting question to you comes in because, 2014 was a strong year. I mean, I sold a couple of dog properties. You managed one of them. I sold at just the right time when markets were high. But I mean, I could strongly look at this and argue and say my net operating income was higher in 2014 than it was this year because my rents are essentially the same, flat or lower, but my expenses have gone up like crazy. So I could say, if I bought a building in 2014, it was worth less in 2018 and even less this year.
Yeah, 100%. And again, a lot of that has to do with just the overall operating numbers, which of course a lot of underwriters look at. And basically the vacancy rate, as you can see there, it was basically 1%. So that played a big role in help maintaining those numbers because there was less turnover, of course, and a lot of those added expenses.
Yeah, and when I look at something like this and I see like 60% of my income going out, out being blown up from expenses, when I was doing multifamily, it was pretty much 40%. That's what you could bank on. And that has slowly crept up to 50, but now to 60, but you see investors, a lot of people that don't have a lot of experience, maybe from out of province coming into Edmonton and, multifamily. I just won the lottery. I bought a great building, down at Boyle Street. Braden, please make my rents from 800 to 2,000. Just snap your fingers and do it. I mean, I'm sure you get those kind of requests.
Yeah, we do. And of course, everything is market predicated. So, I would love to be able to get an owner $1,000 increase or a $500 increase, but everything's predicated on the area and the market at that time. And unfortunately, that's kind of what you need to look at when you're going in and buying a building. And I'm sure Corey can kind of further explain that it's very important during your buy process, during your due diligence process, to look at that number so you're not forced to be super aggressive to try to achieve the rents that you might need to kind of offset a little bit of an overpay. So
Yeah, no, a good point. So let's just talk about the real expenses. Let's talk about the three big ones. Now, you did a really nice piece on this, and those are upgrades, renovations, due to inflated costs from the pandemic, insurance, and utilities. So you did some comparisons. I'll just look on the next slide. So I wonder if you could just say a few words about these items and what you've seen.
Yeah, so again, what I was trying to look at was just to see, over generally what our overall expenses are from, a full unit renovation process. And as you can see, in 2008, that same full rental cost, to your standard rentals was 7,500 versus today is 17,000 or even 20 grand now. So that plays a huge number even when you're looking at buying a building, because you're going to factor those numbers in on your purchase price, of course, or at least that's what I would recommend. And that plays a big role in those numbers. And then going into the insurance and the utilities, you can see the dramatic increase from 2008 to 2023 on both insurance and utilities. And again, a lot of that had to do with, our supply chain issues that we had from the pandemic, and it all just snowballed from there. And again, it's unfortunate we just really haven't had the rent capture back, although we're starting to see it. And that's kind of playing a role in cap numbers and all that. But yeah, it's very eye-opening to kind of see how drastic the numbers have changed in such a short time period.
So obviously, you and I have seen this, and it's obviously a concern. There's a risk, especially with carbon taxes. Carbon taxes just going up like crazy. We can't put our buildings on heat pumps. The heat pumps is the buzzword of the day. That's not realistic for multifamily. So we ultimately have to pass that cost off to our tenants. But one thing that you told me that really opened my eyes was on upgrades. I always would just spend enough. I'm going to clean, maybe I'll paint a couple things, just to get another warm body and then be paying the same rent. Now, you've really changed my way of thinking there. This is an opportunity. When you get a vacancy, this is an opportunity to get massive value in two different forms of a payout. So do you want to talk about that and why that's kind of your strategy? On some people would argue it's over upgrading, but I really like the way you put a spin on it.
Yeah, so the way we kind of looked at that, again, when you're buying a property, usually it's based off of a rent in a certain market period, and then that's based off of a certain type of unit renovation, which is enabling you to get a certain type of tenant at a certain price. So our mindset is if you can buy based off those parameters, you can go in and do an increase in renovations and get that market upgrade, then you're able to increase the rent based off that renovation, and based off the cap rate, it'll increase your value based on, the increase in rent you're going to be able to get. So, generally what we're looking for, it made a little bit more sense off the numbers from previous years, but generally you want to do $100 increase minimum off of a renovation right away. And that's going to kind of on a value base recapture your, I guess, initial payment into that unit on a renovation.
Yeah, so I like that. Then, you're leading the market instead of always chasing the market, right? So then, I've actually done this at Beaumont now. I just turned over a unit and I did, the bare minimum I had to, but then, you kind of open my eyes. The next vacancy I have, I'm going to do a high-end renovation. I'm going to spend 30,000 and test the market to see what I can get in that location. Because
Yeah,
it also depends on where it is. I mean, if you have a walk-up where you have 20 different walk-ups that are the same, it might be harder to raise your rent on a renovation than, Beaumont Place, or maybe you're building in Stony, where you don't have a lot of competing buildings around, but it's a really nice area. You can make them really nice and get higher rents than maybe people might not have realized, when they bought the building.
yeah, exactly. And we're hoping to get many rent increases on that same rental as the market increases, and many good tenants through that process. And our mindset is, again, we want to manage turnovers, and on a very well-maintained building and a market standard type of renovation, you're able to get the best quality tenants at the best quality price during that market period. And as the market continues to improve, you're able to increase your value based off that same renovation price.
Yeah, and I think a lot of investors, last week I did a video on CMHC. So how CMHC is putting the brakes on, renovictions, or these BRRs, what they call it, right? Repositions. There's a lot of buildings for sale right now in Queen Mary Park in particular that have been like this. They've been completely renovated, but they don't have the high rents, and they're actually coming up for sale. So Braden, like, why is that? Why did that strategy that we're talking about, why does that work in our buildings, but not in Queen Mary Park?
Well, again, it's kind of area consistent and tenant profile consistent. Queenberry,
Right.
I would kind of consider more of like a C grade area. And you're just not able to get that high rent because the market surrounding it isn't able to capture that. So the numbers, in my opinion, don't really make sense totally on a renovation cost of 20 to 30 grand when you're only getting, a 25 to $50 increase for a good tenant profile. Again, and at least from what I can see, if you really try to push it and be aggressive, that decreases your tenant profile. It's going to increase your turnover, and it's going to increase your expenses on that poor tenant. And it just kind of eats up that initial gain that you may think you're getting.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, turnover in those areas are tough. I know there's a lot of, there's higher vacancy, when the market gets a little softer because, we know Edmonton tends to go in these 10-year cycles. When the market is strong, you're not leading the market in Queen Mary, you're just recovering. But when the market gets weak, you're the first ones to tank. It's the highest vacancy, the highest turnover, you know, bed bugs and you name it.
High
All the
expenses.
problems hit that first, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yeah. So again, everything is market comparison. You can still find a lot of good deals in those areas. You just have to dig quite a bit, and it's just based
Oh,
off
for
of a
sure.
different number. So
Yeah, so I think maybe you have to buy with a lower purchase price, maybe you set your expectations, have a really high reserve fund, and a budget, etc. So, people that are seeing this, watching this live, there's probably going to be over 1,000 people watch this in the next few days. They're looking at these numbers and thinking, why, God, why on earth would I want to buy a building? If my expenses are now almost 7 grand a month, I can't recover that back. Why are you and I buying buildings? Why are we bullish today? I mean, I can speak for myself, but I mean, where do you see the market headed? I know it's a leading indicator. You've obviously been seeing things that the rest of us have not seen. Literally, probably even today, you've probably seen things like you've been seeing stuff with rents and vacancies. You want to talk a little bit about the market?
yeah, I mean, in regards to the market here in Alberta, I mean, we're very optimistic about the market. Over this past year, we've done a lot of increases for our clients. Some areas as high as $200-300 on an increase in some of our grade A areas. We have some of the largest hydrogen pockets, in the world here in Alberta. The oil sands are starting to kick off again. They're doubling down on Alberta. There was record immigration into Canada last year at over 460,000 people. That's going to continue moving forward. On top of that, we have the lowest cost of living in Canada,
Yeah.
which is a very big component. We see a lot of people moving from Ontario, a lot out of BC, all chasing those kind of low, pricing on the rent side and even on the home building side. On top of that, we have a housing shortage here. So that's also kind of shifting everything towards more of a renting standpoint. So yeah, just very, very optimistic. We think rents are going to continue to go up into next year. We have further increases we proposed already for the beginning of next year, and we're going to further look into that for the latter part of 2024.
Well, I know you've talked me into being aggressive. I know, for every dollar you raise your rents, that's $200 in value. That's the best piece of underwriting advice you can get there on a multiplier effect. But I mean, looking at this as if you're a renter, right? I mean, you basically almost, I'm not going to say you're living for free, but compared to the rest of the country, these are all inclusive rent, folks. Like this is including heat, this is including water, everything but power. And in some cases when there was incentives, they were even getting like, TELUS packages included with this, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. So it was an extreme tenant market, the past, even 10 years really, especially when the vacancy in 2018 through the pandemic was up of 10% or higher. Again, a lot of landlords had to do a lot of incentives, keep rents down, be very, market friendly on the renovation side of things, on the market standardability side of things to try to attract good tenants, just to try to limit that turnover.
Yeah, so where do you see this going? Like I think maybe we have 24 months of tightening to go. So I mean, 2025, let's look at this building. I mean, is it realistic to get, 1,200, 1,250, or even like 1,400, 15, 1,600 for two bedrooms in nicer areas? Is that possible?
I think so. When I look back at history and I look through all of our data, through all the years, every decrease in rent we've had or a decrease in period, we've seen the market on an upturn, get to that point plus an additional $200-300 and recapture that moving forward. So in my opinion, we're almost at that number of where we were, kind of at the good times in 2014. I think we're going to surpass that, easily by a couple $100 on a per unit basis, easily in the next year or so.
Yeah, and assuming we can fire Justin Trudeau and get rid of carbon tax and like, where do you see the expense side going? Do you see the expenses maybe stabilizing at 7 grand? Like, we didn't go back beyond 2008, but I remember 2002, 2003, we were around 3,500. So, I mean, if you track the operating expenses over 20 years, certainly it cannot go at the pace that it has from 2018 to 2023. Like, no one would be a multifamily owner at that point.
Well, exactly. I mean, we started to hear it now, right, through the government and what they're kind of rebating back to a lot of the eastern provinces there on that carbon tax. I think that might continue through as the election kind of picks up in the next year or so here. But everything's kind of predicated to inflation. Our inflation numbers have started to come down. You know, I haven't heard too much more, and if they're going to do another hike rate, I'm sure they probably will do another 0.5%. That should kind of stabilize that, and I think that'll be kind of stabilized for the next year or two for sure on that expense side of things. You know, on our side, on a client basis, we're also doing things internally to help reduce costs. You know, with our large amount of units, we're able to buy things on bulk. All those discounts go towards our clients. All our insurance, we get a bulk rate, which gets passed on to our clients. As an example, our flooring company, for instance, because of the amount of volume we buy through our flooring, the same product, the same standard, we were able to go to China and buy a couple sea cans full of flooring to bring back at a discounted price, which we passed on to our clients. So we're doing things like that to try to help minimize the expense and help, you know, keep it from inflating even further.
Well, that's the power of property management. You know, a lot of people, you know, whether they think they can do it more, they think they can cut expenses. You know, I've had a real appreciation for what you do. You certainly don't get recognized for it enough. I mean, we try to take you to an Oilers game once a year, but we maybe it has to be 2 or 3 times a year because I mean, you're literally on the front lines fighting for us. And with 7,000 units, you have some critical mass there. I mean, you have some say in the way it goes. I know what I also like about your quotes is they're very transparent. I can see directly what the contractor's charging. You're not marking anything it up at all. And if I went to that same guy to ask for that, he's not going to give me the same deal because he's doing business for you in bulk. You know, same as the insurance. I mean, you're able to go to Desjardins or whoever it is and negotiate for 7,000, owners. Basically, 7,000 units. That makes a big difference.
Exactly. Yeah. I actually just had this conversation with a client recently. So for example, again, you know, we're very lucky to work with the third-party contractors that we do. I consider them partners. You know, they are as much as in the success as kind of everybody in our head office as well. But for example, like our plumber, he has a lower rate around $83, $85 an hour with no minimum. And our theory is that we can get him enough work at, you know, buildings that are all within the same area, and he can jump from one to the next very, very quickly, and it helps him out as well. And of course, all that benefit we just want to pass on to our clients because I want them to, you know, get the benefit of that.
Yeah, I want the benefit of that too. So I'm going to talk about the biggest difference now. You've been awesome to be with me. I don't want to drag this out. I don't want to make this longer than I expected, but man, this is just such great information, and my audience is really going to appreciate this. But I want to ask you about budgets. So we do budgets every year. Most people in single family don't do this. Okay, so once a year, and this is one of these things that hits your inbox, and a lot of owners probably like delete. You know, what is this? Why do I have to do this? Right? And it's one of the things that Sam and Nadia have really been hounding me for is Corey, you got to do the budget. You got to do the budget. Why is this so important to do this every year, Braden?
Well, in our opinion, we really want to get, you know, factual numbers on our budget side so we can keep an eye on it on a month-to-month basis moving out throughout the year. So what I do is I actually look through all of our statements on a monthly basis, and I'm able to cross-reference that against the budget. And I know the budgets are all based off of a certain number that I want to see operated for that building. So I can see any discrepancies throughout the month, and then I'm able to correct it very quickly. So a lot of times, you know, water is the first thing to kind of get out of whack fairly quickly. When we see, you know, leaky taps and that running toilets, that type of thing, that'll eat into your costs very quickly. So by me able to compare that to the budget, I'm able to correct that right away and then further save clients money.
Do you have like flags built into your software? So if there's like a month to month, there's a huge anomaly, like do you get tipped off that there's something going on? Or do you have people in your office
I,
that are manually looking at this all the time?
I do. The system that I do is very tight knit on that. There's certain parameters and things that I want them to check on and see. And then through our system, I also get flags on certain things to enable me to catch it fairly quickly. The biggest things that I'm looking at are like the utilities for one, R&M costs. Usually, if a building isn't being managed properly, that'll shoot up pretty quickly. And there's usually certain factors for that. And then of course, insurance costs and that I can kind of control when we do our renewal every year. But those are primarily what I want to be able to focus on for our clients.
Well, and also for like planning rent increases, especially, in Alberta, because you can only do it once a year. So, I mean, it's always good because of, if you look at the slide here, you can see the actual versus the budget. So you can go in there and look. And actually, when I get your statements, it's actually running on the month by month basis. So I can track and see, how it went from our planning perspectives. And it's not just the fact that it's a smart business practice. Lenders actually make you do this. In a lot of cases, you're sending them the operating statements every year. You're sending them net worth. They're even asking for these budgets now too, because this is the most accurate and up to date and real information that they could possibly get their hands on.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said earlier, I have a lot of information that I'm privy to, so I'm able to kind of see that on a lot more timely basis than probably a lot of our clients are. And I do it by area as well. A C grade area obviously going to be managed different and have different numbers than an A grade area. But we vary that and we go over that on a weekly basis with our managers here.
So you're kind of a very kind of not advertised, fabulous resource for underwriting. And I know I'm not going to go into this too much, but I know a lot of people, they reach out to you for help when they're buying buildings. And you have a service that I think you're working on, that you'll walk through buildings, etc. And I think a lot of potential owners maybe don't know that this is something that they can ask their property manager. I mean, if you think about this for a second, I mean, you're managing 7,000 units, you see what all the rents are, you see what all the expenses are. I mean, that should be the first call you make, not the call after I bought this building, in wherever it is. Hey, Braden, I just bought this great building. Make the rents this. What do you think? Maybe that's a conversation that should have happened long before you closed on the property.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how many calls you do get after they've removed conditions and they're hoping to get this rent price based off of their kind of initial thought on the building. And it just kind of puts me in a little bit of a tough position trying to achieve that for them. So I'd rather have the conversation to start out for, and we can kind of talk and guide, and I can use my knowledge based off of the market and what we see to help kind of guide them through that process. And it might just be able to set them up a little better going into their purchase.
Yeah, so I have a couple questions for you at the end, but just for that, I'm just going to summarize this up here. So this is my humble opinion. So, a property management company as an underwriter, I personally think they're the best and the most accurate as far as determining income and expenses. Way more than appraisal, way more than, CMHC reports or anything else. They're also the best at knowing the actual vacancy rate. In mentioning previous videos, you said the vacancy rate is usually a couple percentage higher than what CMHC reports would tell you. And based on your numbers, what the actual rents vacancies are in your area. And you run a very tight ship, you have very low vacancy, but you know what the actual vacancy is. And as far as the budget, like the numbers. So if you were looking for a building yourself, if someone sends you Proforma and says, hey, what do you think of this? Your valuation is probably going to be a lot more, well, should I say, not mean, but maybe more accurate, maybe more conservative than their view would be. I know you and I have walked around buildings and we have the discussion afterwards. Hey, I think it's worth this much, and then you say, no, it's not. And it leads to the conversation of what should I be paying for this building, right?
Yeah, and again, it's no fault to anybody. I think that we're just privy to a lot more information on a timely basis than a lot of the other individuals are. So we're just able to see it a lot easier, a lot quicker, and we're able to, base it and, compare it against other properties. And other areas, which really helps. So that kind of puts us a little bit of a step in.
And you're constantly doing rent surveys. Like, I don't know if you do them weekly, but probably at least monthly, right? Like you're surveying other buildings all the time.
Yeah. So how I kind of look at that is, all of our rent increases are usually done at a certain specific time of the year. And that's basically around, high rent periods, what I've seen historically. And we'll do heavy market surveys around those times. And then even in the softer, quieter times, we're still doing a survey monthly during these, uptick type of markets, because I want to be able to keep a track of what's happening in the market, and I want to be able to see what's happening even through the slow months, even through the summer, for instance. And then that just prepares.
Now, do you think that's Do you think that might be valuable information for someone who wants to buy an apartment building?
Of
I
course.
mean, I would think so.
Yeah.
And you literally can't find that anywhere. So on that, I'm gonna thank you for this. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm just gonna ask you a couple of quick questions here. But before that, I want to remind everybody. So next week is the master class. We're going to talk all about underwriting. So I'm going to talk all about basic filters of what I use, how lenders underwrite, how appraisers get their numbers. We had a brief introduction from Braden. It was more than brief. It was fabulous that you put together the time for the detailed explanation. So I'm going to talk about how property managers underwrite as well. And then I have a couple of case studies in there. So you need to register for this. I have a few spots left. I'm going to post the link under the video once this is published. So I only do these once a year, so you definitely want to make it to this one. So I'm just that was fantastic. I learned something new every time I talk to you, Braden. And the first question I have is, with 7,000 units, realtors, you see these pro formas all the time, and I know it's a tough gig and everything. I mean, did they call you up and say, "Hey, Braden, what should I put on the pro forma here?" Like, did they really lean on your advice, or is this something that you kind of get caught off guard with when someone's bought a property?
I know I have gotten a lot of calls from realtors, and they do come and call and pick my brain, and I'm also calling them and picking their brain. So we have had a lot of those calls, and again, I think it's just I'm a little bit more privy to the information than a lot of realtors. I'm in a little bit of a different working class, I guess you could say, and I'm just able to see these numbers on a daily basis where a lot of realtors maybe don't. But
Well,
yeah, I
yeah,
have gotten a lot of calls.
you could argue that the ones that do that, I mean, they're going to more accurately price their pro forma, and it's going to have a better chance of selling, right?
Exactly. I think it's a huge benefit to them and their clientele that they'll get quicker sales, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as owners, everybody's watching. Everybody talks about interest rates. We're all waiting for that. But I mean, underwriting is really important. So that's good to know that people do. They appreciate what you do and understand that you're seeing this data that people aren't privy to. Like even these CMHC reports. You see these CMHC reports. They're getting information from Boardwalk. I mean, who knows if the information they're giving them is accurate or not, right?
Yeah. And again, all of the information I'm providing is based off our management style. So, numbers will differ based on different management companies and so on and so forth. So all the numbers I'm providing are just based off how I would manage the building and what I want to see. So
So then would you also get the same kind of calls from lenders? So let's say their lenders are underwriting a deal. Or even appraisal companies, let's say, do they call you for advice as well and input?
yeah, we get a lot of calls from appraisers. Not as many on the lender side, but we still get calls from them, and they're picking our brain as well, just to see where the market is. What vacancy is going to be looking like, what we're doing on rent increases, that type of thing. So yeah, we do, and I think it's great. I also call them and pick their brains and what they're seeing as well. They're privy to different information than I am, and I want to make sure that what they're seeing kind of relates and correlates with what I'm seeing. So I think it's a benefit both ways.
Okay, so just last question now, just putting the management aside, put on your owner hat. What do you look for when you underwrite a building, or I guess advice for people, maybe if they're not from the area? I mean, what are the strong indicators that you look for when you want to buy an apartment building?
Well, I'm looking at the operating numbers that they're using. I'm looking at the cap rate that they're using. I'm also looking at where the rents, what type of rents are in the building. Is there room on that side? Are the rents per market based off the renovation style, the condition of the building, and that type of thing. And then I'm varying how I'm going to go into an offer based off those parameters.
So basically, like everyone else, except for you have a lot more insider information. And if you're talking to, appraisers and lenders and realtors, you're not just giving them advice, you're getting information back. So you're very much up to speed on the market all the time. And I think Edmonton is really going to start picking up. I really think we're going to see a big bull run in the next couple of years. I know I'm excited. I want to buy more projects, as do you as well. And I know you've taken on a lot of clients. I think the last time we spoke, you maybe had 5,500 or 6,500 units. So you've picked up the pace a little bit. You're taking on a lot more new stuff, and Braden Equities is growing as well. How many employees do you have now?
So we have, what is it now? We have about 38 in our head office and another 140 part-time staff, which consists a lot of our site managers and that type of thing. So
Fantastic. And I need you to start Braden Equities in Saskatoon for my properties out there. No
Yeah,
offense to my property manager if she's listening, but what you've done for me in Edmonton is just miraculous. I mean, we've gone through a lot. We've had a lot of highs and lows, so we didn't this conversation could have went on for hours, but I greatly appreciate your time. It's going to be of great value to the people listening. And I just want to thank you again.
yeah, no, I really appreciate you inviting me on. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the questions. So hopefully we can have more of these moving forward.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop the live stream now, and I'm just gonna stop the recording and